Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another session of Focus on Liberia on the Marketplace. I am your co-host, Gabriel Carter. Today, I'm in the studio with Jimmy, my co-host, and we have few guests in the studio with us today, Mr. Wanda K. Freeman, and we have Dr. Thomas Wule. I know he's gonna nail me to the cross for calling it Wule. um, so today, our focus is going to be on the Central Bank of Liberia. If you've been following the news, you know there were a few uh, tenure being revoked within certain tenure positions. So we also going to talk about the tenure of the governor of the Central Bank of Liberia, whether that is going to be revoked as well. But most importantly, we're going to be talking about what are the expectations from of the government, the current president, what are the expectations of the current president for the CBL? I know that is a separate
And
entity by itself, but we know there is.
can I make a correction, please?
Yes, please go ahead.
I'm Thomas Ray, not Dr. Thomas Ray.
Okay, okay, Thomas Way. Let me get that there because I know there are people out there that come after people for titles. So let me not put you to the wolves.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, and a slew of other things. So again, welcome wherever you are. Please take a moment, share, and bring your question, bring your perspective, and as we have a good discussion on the central bank, the role of the central bank. Guys, before I know this is your first time on the show, so I want to take the time to give each of you a couple of minutes or so to introduce yourself, your background, and to our audience. We'll start with Mr. Thomas Wett.
Okay, thank you, Gabriel. My name is Thomas Ray. I come from New Crew Town. My parents originally come from Grand Crew County. My last place of work in Liberia was the Central Bank of Liberia. I served as an economist and head of the real sector unit. I was also seconded to the West African Monetary Institute in Accra, Ghana, where I served for 2 years. Part-time, I was associated with the University of Liberia. So that's basically what I am. Thank you
Perfect.
so
Thank
much.
you for that introduction. And again, as we say here, you're welcome here anytime. What we like to do is to tap into the knowledge of Liberians, especially on this show. All we talk about is business, finance, and economics. So we tend to stay away from the political side. So this is where we are, and it's every Saturday. So whenever you feel free, always you're more than welcome. Over to you, Mr. Freeman.
Okay, thank you very much. Is my audio okay?
Perfect.
Okay, and you can just call me Wonder. Yeah.
Okay.
Wonder.
Sounds
So, yeah, Wonder better. Yeah. Okay, so I'm Wonder Freeman, and professionally, my background, accountant, economist, and attorney. More specifically, I'm a trade and investment attorney. I'm also a certified financial crime specialist,
good. Mhm.
and I have done some professional work with the LSCC as a staff, the FIU
Mhm.
as a staff, governance commission, and also work as a private attorney in Monrovia, Liberia. Currently, I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Perfect. Jimmy, anything to say before we jump right in?
Well, yeah, this topic we're talking about, there's a lot of been brouhaha going on
Yeah.
in our home about these appointments.
Right.
And now the next list of appointment is even citing what we thought were tenured positions. And the argument is the president has the they're to serve at the will and pleasure of the president. So he has the authority to appoint who he wants.
Yeah.
While that may be true, the whole idea of creating these tenured appointments were, we think, to insulate the personnel from political whims and also to provide some kind of autonomy
Yeah.
from the government,
Yeah.
and so that they will do their work without fear of reprisal
Yeah.
or replacement because of the political whims of the
Atmosphere. Yeah.
administration. But then there are arguments against tenure, tenured position, and
Hmm.
those arguments are, well, sometimes these positions, their lack of accountability.
Hmm.
And we've also seen stifling innovation. In other words, they're there, but they're not trying to improve this anything.
Correct.
And then there's difficulty removing some of these ineffective appointees. So there's pro argument and there's counter argument
Hmm.
to it.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So the question is, um, what do we need to do so
Okay.
that we make these positions as effective as possible?
Yeah. So, before we jump in, Flomo, welcome to Focus on Liberia. It's good to have you back.
Thank you guys. Thank you. It's good to be back. Happy New Year to every one of you, man.
Thank you, Flomo.
That was 10 years ago. You're just saying Happy New Year to everyone. All right. So I think we have a question on the floor. So before we jump in, I want to hear you guys' opinion on the tenure uh, aspect of those positions. What are your thoughts? Are you for tenure? Do you think we need to have tenure position, whether within the central bank or in other places where we have it, or do you think
Uh,
it should be abolished and do away with?
okay.
I will go with Flomo. Maybe you can take 2 minutes
Okay.
or so to go, and I'll go to um, the other
Thank
guy.
you. Thank you so much, Gabriel. Yesterday, watching YouTube and watching our local Liberian news. It was so fascinating to see, how people are arguing about the whole issue of tenure position.
Hmm.
You know, I, for one, honestly, I'm not in favor of tenure position. However, um, those tenure positions were created by statutes, and as such, those statutes are all legalized. They are all laws.
Hmm.
Those are things that have been existing. Okay, so I listen to the press secretary of the current president as well as the legal advisor of the president. Uh, he was saying that if you're not working at the will and the pleasure of the president, you're definitely going to be removed. You should be, it's true. But what the mistake come from is this: our legislature in the past created those status, okay, and said 10 position, because the Constitution clearly said it, that because look, just take for example, those people were appointed by the president and they were confirmed by the Senate.
Correct.
So as a result of that, they work in accordance with the will and pleasure of the president. So I don't see where we came from with the issue of 10 position. Like I said, it was created by law. So why now they want to abolish it? It shouldn't be abolished.
Okay.
In order to abolish it, you should go back to the legislature and say, hey, we want to eliminate the issue of 10 position.
Mhm.
Then, if the
Yeah, right.
legislature enacted into law to
Yeah.
abolish the 10 position, you will still not remove those people. For example,
The term will be over. Right.
their term will be over before it can take effect.
Right.
I listened to the legal advisor to the president. He was saying that some of those people, they were engaged in political activities. If you say you want to remove them because they were engaged in political activity or in the election whatsoever, you will be infringing on their democratic and constitutional freedom. Because the Constitution says that all Liberians are free to participate or to be a part of any political institution. So regardless of whether you are a 20 position holder or you are minister or you are cabinet minister, it is a fundamental and constitutional right. And that right is an inalienable right. It's a right that is given to you by the Constitution. Whether you minister, whether you are central bank governor, or whether you are a GSC boss, or any other 20 position for that matter, it is your right to participate freely, okay, without duress.
Perfect.
To participate in any political institution, to be a part of it. So those guys were part of CDC work. That's what they wanted, right?
Right.
So you can hold them on the base. I listened to the press briefing yesterday. It was so fascinating. I was like, wow.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Let me hear from the other guys. Wonder. I want to hear your thought on. Are you for tenure or are you against tenure? And if so, why? So.
Well, let me put it this way: I am for adherence to the rule of law.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
And I think there is a tendency in Liberia, especially in political circles, for people to make issue out of a non-issue. On a policy ground, right? The president and the official, they take an oath to uphold and protect the laws of Liberia. I would suppose law means the Constitution, number one, and two, statute, three, regulations, and four, policies and protocols that are in place. All of that constitute the laws of the Republic of Liberia. Now, you don't get to be a player and a referee when you think that the law is unconstitutional. You can seek a declaration from the court that the law is unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court can say yes. Even when the Supreme Court says the law is constitutional, sometimes it is a specific clause, not the entire law. So I feel they are wasting precious time litigating an issue that is already litigated. Okay, so get on with the work, and you have a law, abide by it. If you think the law is unconstitutional, go to the Supreme Court and have the law declared unconstitutional. But you can't have a law that is in existence and you choose to disavow the law because you have your interpretation, where the Constitution have not given you the right to interpret the Constitution. I mean, they interpret laws. The statute, your job is to execute. So you need to execute the law. So I think it's a waste of precious time discussing, the government now discussing tenure, non-tenure when they're supposed to abide by the law. At any point Anytime that they feel is not okay, they go to the Supreme Court, have the law declared unconstitutional, and then they can do what they want.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
I stop there.
Or
Yeah.
they go,
No,
or
great,
they
great,
easily go
great,
to the legislature. Easily
great.
go to the legislature, say you got enacted this law or this policy or this regulation or this statute, but the executive we find it to be unconstitutional. So
Right.
what the executive needs to do is do a proposed law and say, hey, this is it. We want this law to be enacted by removing tenant position. You
Right.
know,
Let
just
me.
go
But
through the channel, do the right thing, but
Right.
don't infringe on the constitutional right of those people.
Right.
It's
Let me
wrong.
hear from. Let me hear from Mr. Blair.
Yeah, I tend to agree to accept what my colleagues are saying. If you check, you will know and see that there's a pattern. You are nominated, you go to the legislature, you go through your interview or whatever it is with the legislature, and that interview result is communicated to the president. Mr. President, we've accepted your nominee, and you can now go ahead. The reason why it went through that process is because of the law. So if you are to rescind anybody's appointment or nomination or current tenurity, then it has to go through the same process. Meaning that go back to where it came from because you nominated them, it has to go to the other branch of government, the Senate, the legislature rather, for that person to serve. In the absence of the legislature giving approval, that person, that nominee may not go to work. And if the nominee is working in that position, it has to be for a given period of time. So it's a catch-22 situation. You must be confirmed by the Senate to be in that position. Now, with our current situation of where this tenurity comes from, it comes from the law. Tenurity, nobody imposed tenurity on anybody outside of the law.
Right.
So what's definitely going to happen is the current occupants of those tenure positions. Obviously, if you want to remove them, you have to go through the law. There is no way out of it. That's the position I hold. They should be there until their current terms or tenures expire, and you can decide what to do. But now, like others will say, then you pay them. I don't really think Liberia has that money to pay all of those people. My belief is that let them serve their current tenurity, and at the end of the day, the president can take a decision.
now,
Brilliant.
there's just one point I wanted to add.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so now on a public policy ground, you cannot advocate a policy when you were in power and you disavow the same policy that you promoted. So we got to know about tenure position through the Unity Party government.
Yeah.
Because they went beyond the constitutional prerogative and added other, institution on the issue of good governance and on the issue of technical independence. And I think they were right because, like some of us, we have a distaste for a political job because of the political interference.
Yeah.
So the tenure was to dilute the level of political interference and the level of control that the president had. And that was advocated by the Unity Party government. And so now for the very Unity Party government to come back to power and disavow what they have already advocated as a public policy issue, I think it's just unfair. So I think they need to leave it and move on to other pressing issues on the economy, how to create jobs, things like that, instead of, get the whole nation discussing a law that is in existence that the Supreme Court has not yet declared unconstitutional.
Yeah.
That's my point.
I agree with all of you. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Gabriel, what I see is that, there, besides the law, all of us should follow the law. That's absolute. There is no way. But the next thing is there is too much of vested interest. What I mean is personal interest in what is happening. Remove the personal interest, and you will see that we have no reason to argue.
Yep.
So for me, it is true. We started with the United Party. And I remember at one point, Madam Salib said, there are people with special skills and we want to carry them over. And because we want to carry them over, they should be protected. And one way they could be protected is through the law. So those people were carried over. But in the absence of that, remove the personal interest. I think there's somebody or some group of people some group of Liberians somewhere pushing President Boyka to disavow with the tenuity of those positions. It is something that Liberia will have to endure. They must be there. And let me give you one example. At the end of President Weah's tenure, we had this issue of Walla Koli Samora and Musa. Samora and Musa. That very decision meant that if they were considered, they would be there for either for life or for a fixed tenure. And because Liberians didn't want it, that's why everybody pushed back on it. Supreme Court, the legislature, everybody said no. If it didn't happen in previous cases, then it means those people are protected where they are, and they should be continue to be protected until their respective or tenuity ends.
Yeah,
No,
but also,
one second.
also let's look at this, right? I agree with you completely. They should be protected under the law because the statutes are created them to be there. The statute needs to be respected. However, if anyone feels that it's unconstitutional or they don't like it, go back to those same very people, that enacted such a statutes, who happens to be the legislature. Go back to them. Tell them, because we come the simple term majority carries the rule. So they can reenact it and say, well, we're going to abolish the issue of tenure and everybody going to work according to the will and pleasure of the president. Go back then. Just do it.
I think I believe everyone is saying the same thing, that and this is a phenomenon, not just a phenomenon, a habit or a behavior that I see with the way our government operate. We have law on the books, but nobody follows them. We have a law we have on the books that protects those individual, but we just have a president that just come in, an administration that just comes in, and they want to just circumvent that entire process and just go after individual who have tenure position. Like, I think you all are saying the same thing, and
Yeah.
I do agree with all of you on
Can I say
on-
one thing?
yeah, make that
Give-
point because I want us to
yeah.
jump in.
It's just short about the issue of tenure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't favor tenure position because everyone that serves in the government or that is appointed by the president
Right.
should work according to the will and pleasure of the president or the will and pleasure of the people, because the president was elected by the people. So basically, you're working at the will and pleasure of the people. So let's say somebody who on a tenure position was appointed by previous government. Remember, the president who appointed that person will have an interest in that person. So with the continuation of that person, is that person is continuing the agenda of the past president somehow, some way. So,
I don't think I agree with that, because you're appointed. I don't care who appoints you. Your interest should be to the country, like
yeah, it
carrying
should be
out.
to the country.
Right. It should be to the country. We shouldn't just relegate it to, because I appoint you, that means the duties that you're doing, the responsibility that you're carrying on are just responsible. You're responsible to me. No, if that's how we see it, then that means we will have, party lining where people are just put in position to sabotage the previous of whoever put them in, or the next person coming in. We should see this as, if you appoint me, I don't care, you and I are in the same party. You do the job as is.
Yes.
You see,
That's how it should
there
be.
will
That's
there
how
will
it should be, Gabriel. But now these people are kind of afraid. They feel that, well, we don't want to have these guys in the tenure position, or because they came from the previous party or previous government. We agree it shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't. But personally, I said I'm not in favor of tenure, because everybody should work according to the will and pleasure of the president. But because you created a statute, so we all should respect it.
So you see, Gabriel, there will always be a policy change or policy update from one administration to the other.
Right.
If you were serving in a previous administration And the way you worked was maybe taking from bottom to top, or the particular way you did it. If there's a policy change, new instructions will be given you, a new timeline or targets, economic targets will be given you.
Right.
And those are the targets you are supposed to meet given the new administration's intention or update. So for me, it is not John Brown per se. It is policy. What the policy says today is what you follow. And if you want to do something else, then it becomes a new thing. But you are still protected by the law.
Yeah.
Right. All right. So fairly, I think we agreed, and I appreciate you guys, offering your perspective on that. I think we're all saying the same thing here. I don't know where this whole fiasco is coming from with this targeting of those individuals. I don't personally agree with it.
No.
We can big fight about it, but they're going to do what they're going to do regardless. So, without further ado, today I wanted us to talk about. I know Dr. Wole was actually, he's a former C and CBL, economist, and I know we have a lot of people here with financial background. But I want us to look at the central bank, the role. Pretty much, I want us to look at what it did before the last 6 years in terms of. There's a noise. I'm hearing noise in the background from someone there.
Yeah.
Right. I want us to look at the policy that were the policy that were implemented for the last 6 years. What they were able to do to either strengthen the financial sector or also create jobs, and then look at the expectation of the CBL for the next 6 years under this administration. So, 1 second here. So my next question to you guys is, I want Dr. Wole to go first because I know he worked at the central bank. So
What I see is that you want Martin Colley to follow me.
I keep referring to you, Dr. Wole. maybe it was a setup to have Martin calling after you. Mr. Wole, please,
Yeah.
could you maybe give us a synopsis of the role of the central bank, and then maybe give us a little bit of detail of some of the policies you guys carried out for the last 6 years, if you can talk about it, if that is okay for you to talk about.
No, that shouldn't be a problem, though.
Okay.
One of the responsibility of the Central Bank of Liberia, we will say the lender of last resort to the government, and to ensure that there is broad macroeconomic stability. And that's what it is. And in terms of broad macroeconomic stability, it covers production, the financial sector, and every economic aspect of our country. Now, if we are to look at them, those indicators, because the performance of the Central Bank of Liberia, policy-wise, should be measured in terms of macroeconomic indicators.
Correct.
And those indicators will look at the economic growth, exchange rate, inflation, external reserve, credit to the private sector, and our domestic output.
Okay.
Now, so what it tells us is that for the past 6 years, you can say it was absolutely good. What can be said is that our results were mixed.
Okay.
Our results were mixed. Our results were mixed because at some point in time, take for example 2019, economic growth was negative. It
Right.
means as a country we didn't do well. In 2023, it was projected at some 4 point something. And the economy is expected to grow this year. But growth is just not by itself. Growth must be measured by the performance of other indicators. So, take for example, exchange rate. Are we saying that from this particular indicator as an economy, that's where we belong? No, that's definitely not where we belong. We can't have inflation in excess of 152 point something, and we say we have done well. And in some instances, some people are saying that it is 192. Inflation at 192 does not tell us that we are doing well.
You mean the exchange rate?
Exchange rate. That's what I mean. Exchange rate.
Yeah.
Definitely, that's what I mean. Exchange rate.
Yeah.
192. We are not doing it. That's not where we should be with every capacity and resources at our disposal.
Okay.
Take inflation, 9.2. By 2017, inflation was 13.9. Now it is 9.2. But if you look at the ECOWAS accession framework, inflation should be something like, it should be far below single digit.
Right.
Far below, but there's a high single digit. So we definitely don't belong here. The country's external reserve. Look at our external reserve. It tells you by 2021, we had 661.6 million. But today, it is now 661.6 million. In fact, we are having confusion over it, what the figure actually is.
It said, I think, correct me here if I'm wrong. I think the last we checked, they said it was 223 million.
223,
Right.
223 million. But
Right.
before that, it was in 600. So is this where we should be? Then definitely it tells us that we have underperformed. Because at every point in time, we as an economy, we as a country should be able to exceed what was previously done, except when we are faced with external factors beyond our control that we don't have those factors that we don't have control over. For example, Ukraine war in Gaza. How does that impact us? Maybe through exchange rate, through import and insurance and all of that. But as a country, macroeconomic wise, we still have a lot to do. Take credit to the private sector. The government at some point in time is crowding out the private sector. So it means rather than the private sector growing, the private sector is not growing. And if the private sector is not growing, it means that all the jobs we are craving for, we may not realize them. Then it reaches a point where government finds herself in the situation to employ everybody. And if government begins to employ everybody, then we are not there yet.
Yeah, Mr. Khan, let me stop you with that. I want to ask you a question. I think you've outlined something very important, and for the benefit of our audience, I think we need to make sure that it lands. Our budget was being reduced from one year to the other. In other words, it's almost as if our economy is shrinking.
It shrunk, not as if it did shrink. Right.
Okay, it's shrinking.
Yep. Right.
Whereas the population is growing, we have more people growing day and day, and we are seeing a shrinking revenue pool. That indication, is that an indication of failure on one part? Because as an economist, we know we're supposed to be growing naturally. And if we're shrinking, is it because of either the past projection was incorrect, or are we actually failing as an economy?
Yeah. So, Mr. Woolley, just answer that, and then I want to bring the other guys in to hear them.
Yeah, what I can say is, as a result of policy failure, the right policies will get us to where we want to be. And if we enact policies, for example, if this policy, if we say let's go ahead with this policy to strengthen the private sector, and if the private sector is not growing, obviously you're going to have a decline in the economy, meaning that we as a country may not meet our projection. Let me give you one example, please. Let me give you an example. At one point in time, we had this policy of lending to members of the private institutions or businesses in the private sector so that they can produce and then we buy from them as a government. I take a particular case of furniture production. If you go along the freeway, all those furniture production firms that used to be there, all of them got some loans from the central bank with the intention that they will produce those chairs, and we as a government will buy those chairs for our schools. At one point in time, those chairs were produced, but the government did not purchase them, so the schools never had them, and the carpenters that produced them were not getting their money, and they were not able to pay the country back, pay back to the central bank. So what it meant was that we didn't meet our expectation. Along the way, that's why we say at every situation, at every level, at every point, there should be a policy, monitoring, and evaluation framework so that we come back and check, did we do the right thing? But if we lend to those carpenters and they produced all the chairs, every furniture we need, and we as a government, we are not buying them. So why then do we expect? we expect some decline in the economy. We expect not to grow. We should expect not to grow to the level at which, because it's a result of expectation that we say take this and invest it. But if they are not investing and if we are not patronizing them, then it means there's a policy disconnect that we need to come back to and have a conversation over.
Okay. So, I have a question for you, but I reserve it. I want to hear Wonder perspective on the topic. Wonder, I know we the question we're asking is what policy did we think the CBL used to strengthen the banking or financial sector, but I also know Mr. Glad spoke at length of several other items as well. So you can pick from any of those if you want to, in terms of you know.
Oh, okay, first let me clarify that when you are gauging the economy, the government budget is not necessarily the performance of the entire economy. So the government budget increase or decrease doesn't necessarily say whether our economy increase or decrease.
Yeah.
So the central bank gives that figure out to say whether our real GDP or gross domestic product increases or decreases. Okay. And so, and the other thing and is important is not only is it decreasing, like if you have an increase, but if you have the growth of the economy dropping, then that can be an issue. And I think in the case of Liberia, the growth rate has been reducing. But you have to give it to the government, for example, when they talk about control of the exchange rate. I think it's been fairly stable. You see, the problem with the economy, the exchange rate, for example, is that it's the issue of stability, not the figure, but the stability. Because when you sign a contract and the contract have to be paid for sometime down the line, you want that rate to be stable so that one party does not come away losing from the transaction because of just change in the rate. So I think they have done a pretty good job on the issue of the rate, but the issue of economic growth, there is a problem with an economy that is over dependent on the government budget.
Right.
Okay. In the change between the UP government and the CDC government, Madam Salih public profile brought a lot of international goodwill. And so a lot of prop up of the economy was done through bilateral aid. Some were drawn through multilateral aid.
Yeah.
But more critical, some were drawn through foreign direct investment. I know because I kind of studied this issue, and I know that the foreign direct investment in the economy dropped by more than 2.5 billion over the period.
Correct.
So what that does is it contracts the private sector angle of the economy. And when this private sector angle contracts, it even affects the ability of government to grow. So if you look at government budget, for example, it has been fairly stable around, I think, 600, 700 million, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay. But by right, in a improving economy, it should be shooting up.
It should be growing.
So
Yeah.
it should be growing. So why is it static? Well, it is static because you are not promoting the private sector. And like Mr. Ray said, we have policy on the book to support businesses, and I will suppose mostly Liberian businesses. So, but the problem is corruption keeps getting in the way. There were two different initiatives under the early regime, the private sector development initiative to promote Liberian businesses and jumpstart the private sector. Under the real regime, there was the small, I think, proposed small business development fund. And sadly, in both instances, they got bogged down in corruption. People took those loans, never paid, and nobody was ever held to account. And that's the sad part. Now, so it's not a problem if somebody take and maybe out of the policy, but if it was abused, people need to be held to account. And some of these people were in the first UP government, they are back now, they are in position. And even during the CDC period, some of these people were in the CDC government, they are back now. So I think the economy is kind of static, it's not growing. And we have to differentiate between the government performance and the entire economic performance, because that's two different things.
Okay.
So let me stop here, and then if you have further follow-up, say
Yeah,
that.
let me hear
Yeah.
from Mr. Flomo. Um, yeah.
Well, thanks to Wanda and Mr. Ray. It was good hearing from you guys. You know, the questions: what policy did the CBO use to strengthen the banking and financial sector? My, my plain blank. No, I ain't see no policy because the banking and financial sector is not of strength.
Okay.
Because if it was of strength, you wouldn't see the current exchange rate to what it is now. If anybody agrees with me,
But the
absolutely.
exchange rate is not a problem because it's the stability, whether it's
The,
stable.
it's not. That's what I'm getting at. Because when you go back many years back, where you used to see uh, a dollar American dollar for 40 Liberian dollars, it tells you that when you look at those days to current, it tells you that I'm not seeing any policy being put in place or any mechanism put in place to strengthen the economy or the financial sector. Absolutely no,
Okay.
it's not.
That's one instant.
Yeah.
Please go
No,
on with
no,
your
So
but that
you
is
know,
that is that is not being fair to the central bank. So what are
No,
they
no,
doing
Yeah,
then
that,
that's
every day?
one point.
that's
That is
that's
one point.
where
Let him.
hold
I
on,
want.
hold
I want
on,
to hear his the rest of his
Okay.
thought. Right.
hold on. You know, the central bank should be there to regulate and govern the entire financial and economic sector, the banking sector. But you will understand that things are being done as it is because policyholders are not being accountable or are not being held to the neck to ensure that we have a stable financial sector or we have a stable banking environment. It's not working. You know, I was doing a research, guys. I tried to pull some formula together and see how can we have a stable financial market in Liberia or a stable banking sector or a stable economy. I came to the point I said, like, well, in order to, I was writing an article that said, that reads, equation for a country's economic growth, where I said PS plus GMP plus VER verb equal to EG. That stands for private sector plus good monetary policy plus value exchange rate will equal to economic growth. Now, the private sector are the number one. In order to have a great economy, you cannot forget about the private sector. In Liberia, you understand that the private sector and the government sector, the employment rate is too much in the government sector. The
Correct.
people that are employed in government are far more than the people that are employed in the private sector. So that's just one thing I will tell you, that in order for us to have a balanced economy or a great economy, we should focus on the private sector. And in so doing, we should have a good monetary policy in place, a great one. And we
Okay.
should also focus on what we call what I refer to as value exchange rate. That has to do with a stability in the rate, in the exchange rate. But every time it fluctuates, it goes up, it goes down. You know, you when you get on the side of the road, somebody has a different exchange rate, and somebody on the upper side of the road has a different exchange rate. Who they're monitoring? Nobody monitoring nothing. Nobody is accountable when it comes to these things.
Right.
You know, so
you see.
that's
Yeah,
If
but
I
Let me
would,
I beg to differ. I beg to differ
if
let me
actually.
let me let me give you guys maybe a
Yeah,
context. Then maybe somebody can respond to this. So before we came on the show, I think
yeah,
so when I think Wonder when you came on, you saw me in the background, but you couldn't hear me. So this is what I
yeah,
was doing. I was looking at the central bank website.
yeah.
I usually read the memos that they put out or the annual report that they put out on the economy, like like a religion, right?
Hmm.
So let me tell you guys what I gathered from there. This was a memo that was put out I think recently, right? So I would just give you guys an assessment. So For them, what they said was that some of the global rate, the growth rate for the world, was at
Mhm.
2%, right? There's a
Mhm.
global inflation which is happening, right? And which is fair. If you look across the globe, there's a inflation around the world, right? Which they were uncomfortable with. In addition to that, because of that, they wanted to maintain high interest rate, right? To help ease with the inflation that is happening around the world, which is, I agree with them, right? I think Mr. Wole also talked about inflation. So inflation right now is at 10.5%. We're
Mhm.
expecting it
That
to
is very
be,
high.
yeah, is going to 11.4%, almost 100 basis point increase by the first quarter of this year. This is what they have out there. Now, the positive side of that is that there's political stability, which they think will improve business investments, and that will help put some jolt within the economy as well. But there's also the uncomfortable part in there as well. I think most of you guys mentioned it, the exchange rate. Where now I think 189.5, so let's say 190, the exchange rate to $1. There is also a high non-performing loan on the books, right? It increased by 2.6% to 18.5%. So that means every dollar the banks in Liberia lend out, they lose about 19 cents, right? So that's the non-performing loan. And the threshold, the comfortable threshold is supposed to be at 10%, right? So, however, they said the banks are capitalized and well liquid. Now, in addition to that, they said the assets of the banks increase in the country. I mean, lending to businesses were moderate. But there's a concentration issue. Concentration in the trade, the construction, and services industry. I think most of you guys have financial background. So if there's a concentration in one area, it's a problem from a regulatory standpoint. Because
Yeah.
let's say if there's a downside within the construction and you're too concentrated in the construction industry, it could become your whole bank can become insolvent, right? So there's a concentration issue that they highlighted, right? Now, here's my question to you guys. The the comfortable level of what we call a healthy bank, right, is mostly measured by what we call the loan to deposit ratio. So because the deposit that you take in, every bank takes in on the balance sheet, that's liability, right? Now, to offset that, you have to also lend out at least about 70% of that because that's assets on your balance sheet, right? So my question to you guys, how is it that the central bank is saying that the banks in Liberia are stable, but we have all of these negative things that they highlighted here?
Okay, so let me come in
I know
there.
there's a lot that I say is a mouthful, but I want you guys to
No.
piece
Yeah,
it all together.
let me come in there with the issue of the bank stability and the issue of non-performing. We will continue to have the non-performing loans problem because the private sector is not viable. And I mentioned it here, you know, when you have an overwhelming control of the economy, the private sector is not growing and the government is static, you're going to have a problem because people do their businesses and they hope that when it goes well, they will pay their bank. But if the economy is not growing and things are not moving, then if the businesses don't do well, the first casualty will be the bank. They will don't pay the bank, and then you will have a problem. Um, the other thing I want to say is I think people don't pay a lot of attention to the issue of promoting private sector jobs because when there are jobs and people are working, obviously they patronize the businesses and the businesses can pay the loan to the bank. If you follow the level of employment, we have a problem because we don't even track those in the government. If you go on Ministry of Labor website now, because in a typical country, they track the unemployment rate on a
Yep.
quarterly basis
On a quarterly basis.
to
Yeah.
know if it's going up or if it's coming down. We don't even track it, so we don't know. But we know that there's a serious unemployment problems.
Mhm.
And the government regime coming in, they're not focusing on the policy that can like jumpstart the private sector or jobs or push for employment. They are focused on distribution of the public sector job, which is understandable, but that's not what gets the economy going.
I agree. Yeah.
And just one last thing on my colleague talking about the central bank is zero policy. I think that would not be fair to them because I see them doing some policy in financial inclusion. I see them doing some policy in the mobile money space where they're trying to bring in more people and more like mobile payment mechanism. They also do treasury bills auction, which generally they say has been growing. In the last report, they mentioned the fact that it is increased by 19% over the year. So that is a way of like getting out excess liquidity from the market in the hope that that money can filter back to the banking institution and so forth. So, in my thinking is that the financial sector will struggle and will continue to struggle if we don't pay serious attention to private sector job growth.
I absolutely agree with you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I'll leave you at that and see what
Yeah.
the others have to say.
Yeah.
Mr. Black.
Yes, Gabriel, what is happening for us is I wouldn't say central bank shares takes the responsibility 100%.
Okay.
And if we go that route, then we may not appreciate some of the good things that come from the central bank. Now,
Fair.
let's begin with loans and non-performing loans and all of that. It is true, but I have always maintained that those loans have owners, and the owners should bear the responsibility of the non-performance of what they do. But beyond that, if we say the threshold is 10% for non-performance, and we are doing monitoring and evaluation of every loan, then it means by the time we are reaching to 8%, 10%, and it is going beyond that, then we should give a signal. There should be an alert.
That,
Yeah.
All of us receive
exactly.
alerts.
Right.
All of us receive
Yeah.
alerts. So then the owner or the business should be informed that this is our expectation, but you are not meeting our expectation. So what is happening?
But
Now let's
Some
look
of
at
that is due to corruption in the system.
Yeah.
I have a lot of
And
questions
and
for you guys, but
and,
I
let
want
us
and
Scott
the
to
lack
land.
of
Let
Yeah.
him land. Let
communication.
him land.
let us
You
look
know.
at
Yeah.
let us okay, sorry. Let us look at the sectors. For example, if you look at trade and construction, when you talk to the people in trade and construction, they tell you that in terms of returns, it is faster. And banking, the commercial banks have this information. And because they have this information, they are comfortable, very comfortable indeed, giving loans to people in the trade and construction industry because they believe that they will get their money back in very short time. But the question is also asked, why isn't that being done in agriculture? For example, rubber, cocoa. I had an interaction with people from the agricultural sector, and one of the things that came out was, when it comes to cocoa, rubber, gestation period is lengthy.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The gestation period is lengthy, so we're going to wait all of that time. Is like we lock our money up, and if our money is locked up and not available, then we can't grow. But it still does not prevent anyone from lending to those sectors. What is most important is a government intervention. And I am convinced, I stand to be corrected though, that the government over the years has done remarkably well through the central bank to ensure that there's access to capital. This can be measured from, for example, central bank is all over the country, and there is no incident that somebody put in, for example, to do some work in the agricultural sector and they were turned down. If you go to AfriLand First Bank, which is in the area of agriculture, they will tell you that we are lending to the agricultural sector. People may not get what they want, but we are doing our best in that sector. That should be commended. But The skewness of the loans is what should concern us the most. If these loans are so skewed in this direction, there should be, for example, an increased intervention on the part of government. Let's
Yeah.
look at, for example, due diligence. If the loans are not coming out, it means there should be an additional layer of due diligence to ensure that these things happen. But the central bank again is still doing its best in terms of the overall economic, macroeconomic performance through, for example, T-bill, USD auction. That's what the central bank does. And we must commit, people must commit that, for example, if you receive USD auction to import bread of whatsoever it is, import that particular commodity, don't stack it in your personal account.
So let me say this quickly, and I'll let you guys come in. So I think it's not a love hate relationship, but it's kind of a indifference to, or maybe a disdain to what I think the capability of the central bank is and what it's currently doing. And so there's the potential of what it could do to help stabilize the economy and what it's currently doing, right? I think most of you mentioned some of the stuff. Wanda mentioned, he talks about the collection of data that will help inform our decision. I would just take maybe a piece from Mr. Willett, expose here with on the non-performing loan and what the government is supposed to be doing. So yes, I agree with you. The responsibility doesn't necessarily lie on the central bank, but their enforcement, their compliance, through the compliance will put the pressure on those commercial banks to do what they're supposed to do. Now, let's say if you go audit a bank and they don't have a good policy in place to collect loan, right, or to what we call workout or trouble loans, or as we call it in Liberia, non-performing loan,
Yeah.
then you give them advice. You make them revise their policy. Here we do that. Here I manage almost $2 billion, right? The OCC get managed by the OCC. Not I agree with you guys. Not every loan I underwrite turns out good, right? So in that case, what happens? Let's say if I structure a loan and the term was, let's say, 30 years or 10 years, and because the interest rates keep going up, the spread that we have on that loan, they keep closing up and it becomes problem loan. Instead of me collecting financial every year, I will now move it to every 3 months, right? Now, that's when the OCC come in, right? The Office of Currency and Control, right? That's
Yeah.
when they will come in. They will say, hey, what are you doing to collect on this, right? At that level, you know what we do? We get lawyers involved. The bank has a team of lawyers. Say, hey, we're trying to work with this client, but they are not trying to work with us. Some
Yeah.
clients will work with us. They will say, you know what? I will pay down my loan, maybe a 1.5 or $2 million, so the debt service can continue to be in a healthy place, so that loan can be what we call pass credit rated. So its pass is perfect. Now, in some cases where the clients are not doing that, we initiate the process. We get lawyers involved. What we're doing, we season the collateral. The collateral they put on there, we're season it. This is at the bank level. And
Mhm.
if we're not doing that, the OCC, the government comes down on us. That we report all of our trouble loans to them. Say this is where we are, and this is what we're doing on a quarterly basis to mitigate that. Now, so this is why even in as much that I don't put the responsibility on the government, I mean on the on the central bank, I think they have a lot of responsibility to bring the hammer down on these commercial banks to be able to resolve it. And if they don't have the right policy in place, you pretty much dictate to them, because that's what happens. They will dictate to you, this is what you need to do to cut down the non-performing loan, right? So I think there are a lot of like baby steps, the smaller things that we need to do that should be done to mitigate some of these challenges. I would say one last thing, and I'll end. The other thing I think that Wule mentioned was that the central bank lending to furniture producers, which I absolutely do not agree with. That go against any central bank around the world or even in Liberia policy. You're supposed to, and this is why I believe the communication within the banking sector is supposed to communicate. The central bank over here, we have what we call, I think we have it in Liberia, right? The SBA, right? Small Business Administration. You facilitate that, you guarantee half of that loan, and the bank that underwrites it guarantee half. right? So you don't have to do the direct lending. I think Mel Jones did something like that with the market women, and that didn't turn out good. We're supposed to learn from that. So for me, I think this gain that I have for the central bank, because I believe that it has potential to really improve the economy of Liberia. But I think we make excuses in as much as we make excuses, but also the market conditions are not there too. So that's why sometimes I do call them a slide. But if we do the little things perfectly, things will improve at least from there, and then the owners will be on the private sector to help them on that side as well.
Gabriel,
Yeah,
Gabriel,
Gabriel,
Joseph,
let me come
Gabriel,
in
Gabriel,
because I think
Joseph.
I have a unique perspective from
Right.
the background of a lawyer that did collection for a commercial bank in Liberia.
Right.
yeah,
So a little bit on the non-performing loan side. And I was telling you, as the corruption in the system is one of the main problems. And that is not a banking issue per se, but it's a due diligence issue.
Mhm.
So when I speak of corruption, and Liberia is involved in corruption, but even in the banks, what happened is that the bank have standard policies in place to make sure your collateral is okay, is valid, and the value you put on it is correct. From the perspective of a lawyer for one of the commercial bank, what we find is by the time we go to pursue these individuals, sometimes the collateral was widely overstated. So even if you were to collect, the collateral cannot cover for the
The
loan.
loan I was given. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
The other problem is the slowness in the litigation system. You can't get a judgment easily. It drags out over extended period, and the bank end up losing not only the money but losing on lawyers and so. So the biggest thing the central bank can do is on the due diligence front, to make sure that the questionable or they don't water down the standard in terms of renting out loans and what have you. Because,
Exactly.
but what you have is that when they say when a man hair get burned, will you ask if it's beer, or a house is on head is on fire? Will you ask if the beer got burned? So the corruption in Liberia. So now you have these banking officer like the loan officer
Right.
conniving with loan applicants to get loan that they are not necessarily qualified for, giving them kickbacks, and then the loan going bust. And now when we lawyers come in to collect the money, we realize the collateral. I mean, how do you give this money on the collateral? It's all inflated collateral. So there's a lot of corruption in the system. I think also too on the issue of policy authority, the central bank loses it sometimes because the central bank gets in the business of using up the bank's collateral.
Wow.
And so you put yourself in a compromising position with the commercial bank when you use up their collateral, which they do quite frequently. Now, I want to push back a little bit on the issue of central bank reaching out to commercial enterprises. I think that maintains and continue to be the responsibility of the government. When, for example, they have two policies that they introduced to promote private enterprise and Liberian participation, and they all went bust. The private sector development initiative under the UP, corruption took that over. Nobody was held accountable. The small business development loan under the CDC, corruption took that over. Nobody was held accountable. But that is the way. You have to have a standing policy, and then central bank can, like you said, guarantee loans and stuff like that. But the central bank itself cannot get in the direct business of
Exactly.
loaning out to these businesses. But I say, continue with those policies, but when they are abused, identify the people who abuse the system
And hold them
and punish
accountable.
them.
Right.
You see,
Exactly.
But if
let
you fail to identify the people who abuse the system, you fail to punish them, and you're going to recycle some of these people in government. Because if you go look at that list, a lot of politicians took money under those loans, they don't pay, and they get recycled in government. So hold those people accountable and let the system continue to work.
Gabriel,
Yes. Yeah.
what I see is, let's make a correction first. When I said the central bank is giving out those loans were actually given through commercial banks. That's the point I want to make.
Okay.
There's, those loans
Fair
were
enough.
actually given through commercial banks.
Okay.
And when those loans were given through commercial banks, I still remember I was one of those responsible for going out to see how they were performing. And at one point in time, if they were not performing well in terms of the loans not being paid or the loans were approaching some level, we say they were getting bad, then we had to call them. And on multiple occasions, some of those loans were restructured.
Okay.
We went through the schedule, we did all of that, but still, because our government, the government that promised, for example, the carpenters that we're going to buy all of this, it wasn't happening. Take, for example, again, if we look at agriculture, you let into just one area of the economy. Agriculture is out. Then what do you expect in terms of overall economic macroeconomic performance? Obviously, we should have a challenge with overall macroeconomic performance if loans are skewed, for example, just in those areas. Then there is a huge problem. My colleague talked about, when the loans are not performing, at least before that, before it reaches a point where we say it is not performing, there are indicators. Are we saying that we don't know if this person or if this entity was supposed to make some periodic payments and it is not coming? Then it means there are challenges. What do we do? Do we go back to them to provide additional education or to guarantee them? In my view, if there is a challenge, we have a responsibility to educate them, do a rescheduling.
Right.
But also, the central bank has a responsibility for those areas that are not performing, that are not being considered. Everything is in the direction of trade and construction. What about agriculture? If agriculture is not performing, what do we do? Do we give loans to the agricultural sector at some moderate rates? That's an option available to us. And I know the folks at the central bank have the capacity and the desire to do it. But maybe there are policy environmental challenges. If there are challenges, everyone should get over it. In terms of President Bouaka doing his best, I think the folks at the central bank should remain so that they all work together and see where we go because they are protected by law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Let me
Flomo,
comment.
I
Yeah,
want to hear your thoughts on this as well.
yeah. With the issue of non-performing loan, my point here is how do we manage it? There are a lot of mechanisms that can be used to manage it, and it start with intent first, with the bank or the officers first. Like I work for U.S. Bank. Uh, I manage nearly about $5 billion. The big company I manage, the county of LA County, the city of LA, Los Angeles, Dakota County, Minnesota,
Hmm.
Hennepin County. I manage Palm Beach, Florida.
Hmm.
Because when it collects all the money, it comes to U.S. Bank. So, as a financial officer there, I manage those portfolio to ensure that I'm up to date. So those money that the county sent to U.S. Bank I manage is my responsibility to ensure to find people who wants loan, right? People who want to get a loan.
Hmm.
The terms are already there, already been created. Go by the book, give the money out. Now let's say, for example, some people are very busy, right? Those
Hmm.
financial controller in those big agency or businesses, they sometimes busy they forget the lost track. And I have to reach out to them. When I know it's time for debt service happens sometimes the first, the 15th, or the last day of the month. Few days before debt service, you have to reach out in order to make the loan not to be a non-performing loan. You
Hmm.
have to reach out, send a communication, email, phone calls. Hey, your debt it's time for you to pay your principal and interest. Reach out to them, you know. And another way to do it too, also to make sure that non-performing loan doesn't go bad, at US Bank we got what we call the bad banking operational unit. They are there to ensure collection. They'll be on your back to
Yeah.
make sure the
Exactly.
loans are
Yeah.
paid according to the bad banking operational unit. It got to be very effective. That unit is made up of attorney, legal experts, legal scholars that are on the book. They are in compliance with DTC, the OCC, making sure that when they're going after you, they are going after you according to the book, in order to make sure that that loan go default and or the bank doesn't lose. Another way also, to manage a non-performing loan, the NPLs, is to ensure by restructuring the terms of the loan. Because there are some people or some businesses will go bad, they ain't able to pay by the loan. You can reconcile with them by restructuring the terms of the loan. When those things are done, are put in place, from my perspective, I believe, the loan can get back on track. Even though they may not be able to pay on time, but when you restructure the loan, remember, you'll also be restructured. You'll also restructure the term, restructure the interest rate, the payment. Yeah. Because if I am restructuring your payment and the terms of the loan, it's not just going to happen like that. There'll be an increment to that loan also.
Right.
So
yeah,
that's what we do here on this side.
Gabriel, sorry.
go ahead.
Gabriel, there's something that we should look at. Like my colleague said something. In terms of lending, are we basically lending to businesses on account of their potential to grow the economy, or are we lending to individuals because they are friends of people in government or because they have needs? And that
So
is where we should be coming from.
so let me
The- yeah,
I want
Let
Wanda, you
me,
wanted to come in?
yeah,
yeah. I just
Yeah,
want to
go ahead.
respond directly to Ray's statement.
Go
The
ahead. Go ahead.
banking sector is not going to think about the economy when they are giving out loans. They are going to think about their profit. They are going to think about the risks, and they are going to compare and contrast the risks and the return. The people who are responsible to think about the economy is the Liberian government. They have to have a defined policy to reach out. For example, we have Gabriel mentioned the Small Business Association. There is a law, Liberian law, on commerce, that government is supposed to purchase a minimum of 25% from Liberian businesses, and they're supposed to file reports. Do they really file those reports, and do people really track it to make sure that they are promoting Liberian businesses? Because the policy is both end, at the supply end and at the demand end. So at the supply end, you want to have policy that farmers can have access to capital. And the reason why government need to go there is because most of the banks are not that solvent, to give long-term loans. And agriculture, any financing to agriculture will have to be somewhat long-term. And when the bank have limited capital base, they will talk about overdraft, they will talk about salary loan, all these kind of trade financing loan, all these kind of short-term loan. And if they are thinking on the return and the risks, that's fair. If the government think that the sector is not being provided for, come out with a policy. Let's say farmers expansion policy, whatever name you give it. Put in $10 million, get the central bank to put some banking institution together, let them put another $10 million, and manage it without corruption. Okay, but I said to you, we have similar arrangement, and the first thing people gave people loan, it was not strategic. People gave somebody loan for cold water to manufacture not cold water, but what the thing mean, or plastic bear water and stuff like that. So corruption gets in the system. So the banking sector, to emphasize, they're not going to do a system-wide analysis to give out loan. They will consult their risk issue. They will consult their profitability expectation, and that's how they will give loan. The government is their responsibility. They have to come up with
Gabriel,
they have to put some money on the table, and the central bank now has to work with the banking sector to guarantee additional funding. So if the government put up 10 million and the central bank can mobilize another 10 million, that's 20 million. Okay, and now you can now have a long-term basis to get farmers, and so that one side, the other side is to buy Liberian or buy local businesses, products and stuff like that. So if you do that, there is both the supply side being taken care of, where people are farming and producing, and the demand side where people are buying those products, and there's a systematic way of buying it. But we don't do that, and we expect the private sector. The private sector is not going to think about it, the economy as a whole when they are making their decisions.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
let
So
me
like,
let me let me say something when it comes to the issue of loan. Uh, what I see so far in my career, that anytime the private sector, because bulk of is what we deal with
yep,
every day, 90%. So when those money comes in, when the money come in, and then they have to be loan, we got something what we call general purpose. So if a business come and say, well, uh, I want to buy a note from Dakota County, right? If I'm giving you that note, I need something. I want to see the end goal, the purpose of the loan, who are the beneficiary. Even though it's business, you're doing a business, but want to know, in other words, when we say the purpose of the loan, the beneficiary of the loan, people get confused. What do you mean the beneficiary? Simple, like how are you going to invest this money in the community? Who are those people going to benefit? For example, if you say you're going to be um taking clothes from China, right, to come and sell in Liberia, where you selling the clothes? You know, whom are you going to be selling the clothes to? At what race are you going to be selling the clothes to? Those are the documents that I receive. I go over there, I evaluate it. Then I send it to upper management when I'm comfortable. A signature goes on, then I send it for second signature before we approve it. Because the essence of doing those things is to ensure that we have a balance when it comes to the flow of money in the economy. Because we want to ensure that people are being employed based on our money, because it reduces the level of poverty. Because business ain't like, bro, a company, a big company ain't gonna just take the money and keep it to themselves and put small in the business and not employing people. Because the essence of taking the loan is to ensure that we have a balanced economy, and a balanced economy will result to people being employed. People will benefit from it when they get employed.
yeah.
It's just a
Uh,
yeah.
take on it.
Mr. Wale, you had a
My
comment. All right.
yeah, my tally tells me that the councillor has mentioned corruption 23 times.
Yeah.
And that tells us
Man, Mr. Wonder, somebody will keeping track on you.
Yeah, well, I'm a financial crimes person. I'm a certified
that
financial
tells
crimes
us
specialist. So,
that
and I know
tells
that's a
us
big problem in Liberia.
yeah,
Go
that's a
ahead.
huge problem in Liberia. And I was making the comment that are we lending to businesses or are we lending to individuals? And that's the point where I come in since you started talking and this corruption and all of that. Businesses, in my view, have the potential to pay. But if you are lending to names or government officials, they can't pay after they leave the job.
Yeah.
Then automatically those loans become bad. So the point I am making is that the due diligence should be, and there should be an additional layer of due diligence, because if this man
At
is
where? At the
serving
central bank or at the bank level?
the commercial banks, because central bank does not lend directly to individuals. Central bank monitors those commercial banks, and the commercial banks are the ones lending to individuals and businesses. So if we have a huge a bad loan basket, it means that the commercial banks indeed are not doing well, or perhaps their level of due diligence requires additional layer.
Yeah. So let
That,
me
that,
let me
that's,
let me give one point here, right? I was just in Ghana uh about a week ago. I was there for almost 2 months, right? Some of the stuff you guys are talking about here, I I wanted to see specifically why is Ghana economy doing so well, right? Especially the banking sector. There's a influx of diaspora from here that are going there, that buying real estate to the point that there's a whole city. I think the third largest city right now that is coming up is African American in Tamale, which is about almost 11 hours drive from Accra, right? Their banking sector. So I went to inquire about if I just went to the bank, one of the banks, FNB. to see how the process of buying a house. They asked me pretty much everything that you ask for here when you go for a loan are the same thing they ask for. They wanted to see pay stubs. They wanted to see, uh, you know, bank statements. They wanted to see letter of employment. They wanted to see even my credit score. So even though I don't know if they have it there, but they asked me for TransUnion, which are TransUnion, the Equifax, the three credit bureaus there. They wanted to see those things, right? Those are layer that they put in place. And the reason why I say this is because it goes to what Mr. Woolley was saying. In as much that I think that we can have all of these layers in place, is a twofold. The regulation should be both at the commercial banks, but it should also be at the central bank level. Why is that? I will say this quickly and I'll land and turn this over to you guys. So at the commercial banks level, the board supposed to be looking at those things. Who are we lending to? Where do where do our concentration lies? Right? Let's say if you are the board, you're overseeing a bank and you're seeing the concentration here, your duty is to advise that bank to say, hey, we're lending too much in the agriculture sector, and there's a downturn in the agriculture sector, it will impact our ability to become sustainable. Or if there's a concentration here in the construction, it will impact our ability to be sustainable. So let's balance this out. That's why the board is there for. They're supposed to be reviewing the type of loans that is being made to what type of individual and how those, even down to the underwriting. Right now, that's the bank itself. At the central bank level, now this is where the regulation comes in, the compliance, because those banks are regulated by the central bank. Now you see a bank that is at 10.5%, or what was the, like 10.5% over the non-perform, 18% non-performing, right? The next thing that's supposed to raise up to you, what type of underwritings do these people have in place for which they're not performing is at this level? That's the first question.
Yeah.
If you call the bank CEO or the what we call the chief credit officer at that bank, and he explained to you you don't agree to it, you make a visit to that bank, you go over their document, and you start going over. This is what regulations are for. This is what compliance do every year, right? To make, now if you look at those regulation and compliance and you see that the underwriting policy that they have are the reason why they're having more non-performing loan, you create or you dictate to them. We have it here. Like I said, I get that all the time, right? There's, matter of fact, we get every 3 months new regulation comes in from the OCC, right? Oh, you guys are too concentrated in
Yeah.
the real estate. You need to change it. This is how you, matter of fact, your debt service used to be 1.25 for every payment, right? Now you need to take it up a little bit at 1.30, right? So it become more conservative, right? Because you know those commercial banks, in as much that they are owned by investors, are not just owned by investors. They are so important to the economy that if something happened to them, it will impact the economy at large, right? So the regulation should be twofold, both within the bank and also from the central bank. And this is where I don't see those two marrying each other every time. And that's where my problem lies. Yeah.
Yeah, picking up on what you said, Gabriel. In a free enterprise system, we have to work with the incentive system. So you have the different sectors like Red mentioned, construction, trade and services, and stuff like that. But what is the incentive to the financial sector to shift their loaning activities in a particular industry? You know, so if you don't have the necessary incentive structure, and like I said, I repeat, the banks are going to make the analysis on the profit and the return. In as much as it's nice to spread your funding over a wider sector of the economy, at the end of the day, it is profit and return that they consider. But the central bank can come in and provide an incentive structure
Right.
that we
Exactly.
encourage the bank to say, look, okay, if you go in this industry,
Agriculture. Right.
yes,
Right.
we can meet you one to one. Or if you go in this industry, we can make this concession to you, stuff like that. Then you now create an incentive for the banks to now say, oh, but either we go in this way, we increase our profit, or it will increase the strength of our financial flows, or it will lower our risks, stuff like that. But in the private sector, nobody thinks about the economy system wide in order to make the decision. It is the profit that they will get and maybe the associated risks, and based on that, they make their decision. But
Right.
obviously, I don't think the central bank is doing a lot to steer the banking sector in a specific direction. I think they are acting more like a maybe the cash withdrawal system for the government. In a lot of instances, they are loaning to the government and spending their time focusing on that instead of assessing the economy and seeing where they need to nudge it. But I maintain that if we have a free enterprise system and we believe in that, we should come up with incentive structure
Yeah.
that will be able to decide to help the financial institution to shift their direction in a way. But that's why we come back to the issue of corruption, and
Right.
that makes it 24. Number 24,
You keeping
because
track for him, eh?
yeah, that's number 24. I'm keeping my own track because now if you come up with a small business development fund, it may not even small business, just a Liberian business development fund,
Right.
and you put up a $10 million, and now party secretary general,
Mm.
party this, party that, they take the money. Obviously, it undermines the system because one, maybe they're not even involved in the sector that you are trying to promote, and two, there can be conditions for those kinds of loans because they are soft loans with concessionary terms.
Yeah.
So some of these people don't even meet the condition. And we have to have a systematic way of solving our problem in Liberia. That is why we are changing leadership and we are not achieving our objective because we don't have a systematic way of solving the problems.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have a system in place. The system make the precondition, and you work with the system, and you steer the private sector in the direction that you want them to go. But they by themselves will solely concentrate on their profit and the risks, and that's how they make their decisions.
Yeah.
Gabriel,
Go ahead.
Gabriel, you said two things. One was reference to Ghana, and
Yeah.
another thing is our government.
Hmm.
I live in Ghana for a long time, for a
Hmm.
very long time. So whenever a discussion comes out on Ghana, I try to show my own appreciation of what they do or what they have there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
And yesterday or 2 days ago, I was reading, why a lot of the people from America, they are going to Ghana and not Liberia.
Mm.
But we have our roots here in America too. So they should be directing some of their visitations or permanent settlements to Liberia.
Mm.
But what I gathered is that from what I read, is that the banking system, they were talking about the banking system in Ghana.
Yeah.
They said it's reliable.
Very.
You can do anything anytime and you will get some support.
Yeah.
And the overall macroeconomic environment is stable compared to other places. For example,
And the
Liberia.
strongest currency in West Africa by
Okay.
far. Yeah.
And there is an appreciable level of infrastructure in Ghana
Yep.
to the point where you can leave from Accra. That article I'm still looking at it. You can leave from Accra to go to Tamale, go to Cape Coast, go to Aflao, just within a single day, and
Yep.
return to Accra. Does it happen for us, Gabriel? It
Let me
does
tell
not
you
happen.
quickly. So there's Uber, there's Yango, and then there's Bolt. Those are three taxis, right?
That's
Private
it.
sectors. Then they have the regular taxis that you can hail. Those Uber, Yango, and Bolt, there's an app. You can download each one of them. You can be in point four, you call it, it will come right in front of you. It take you to where you're going. You come back. Matter, it's so secure. Ghana is like when I mean so safe, so safe. The banking sector,
And the
the bank,
issue
I would
of
say
the
this. Right.
Go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
please. Go ahead, Gabriel. Go ahead,
So
Gabriel. I'm
let me
sorry.
just say this quickly and out. The banking sector. I took my card from here, right? My bank, the bank that I have here, the card. I can use it over there anywhere, any bank, take money out. Even use it as a POS system, right? Easy. And there's never a place that I went to where they said there's no money. Right. Infrastructure everywhere. If you don't want to take drive to Tamale, you can take a plane over there. Right. So that is anyway. I just wanted to interject
Yes.
those things,
Thank
but
you.
go ahead. Right.
And the reference to what you just said, my family was in Africa just the other time, Liberia, Sierra Leone, they were just between there. And as they were using their bank cards from here, at some point in time, they were told you can't go above this limit. So obviously, they had to make calls here to America to see what intervention could be provided because they had a limit in doing what they wanted to do back home.
Mhm.
So, in terms of why these African Americans are going to Ghana compared to us, then that's everything about it: the infrastructure and the banking system, the culture of welcoming is high in Ghana as
Right.
compared to us, and that's where we need to step in. Now, when it comes to bad loans, unsupported loans, and all of that, I will think our government has a strong responsibility to ensure that the right thing is done. For me, I don't want call corruption.
So I think that you should speak to this question. What do you guys think the current president can do to? I don't think there's his limit to what he can do in terms of interfering with the central bank, but from a policy standpoint on his side, what do you guys think he can do to help what the central bank is doing to ameliorate some of these things that are happening in our economy? Maybe
Well,
you can continue on that. Right.
uh, is it the president of the central bank or the president of Liberia?
No, the president of Liberia.
Oh,
The
okay.
president of Liberia.
Because the questions to the president of the CBL. That's why.
The
No,
governor.
no.
So
The
yeah, I mean
government,
the current president
Yeah,
of
but
yeah, I meant the
yeah,
current
let
Yeah.
president. Right,
Okay.
right.
Let me hit on that. From an expectation point, the president is the chief
I need to learn
executive.
English. Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead. Sorry.
you know, expectation while the president is the chief executive of the nation. He appoints the CBL governors or the board of governors. He appoints them and they get confirmed by the Senate. You know, I think from a broad perspective, before he can even appoint them, they should be well vetted, well suitable to ensure that those people that are going there, they have the credibility, they have the moral, they have the professionalism and the education when it comes to implementing the functionality of the central bank. That's my expectation for the president. Because if you appoint somebody who does not have the credibility or the experience or the education of governing the central bank and they go there, it's going to be a total damage. So at this point, before they can even get there, they should be well vetted. Somebody who is well suitable, who you can count on, that will change because the central bank is the center point of the economy. Those people who are there are the people who the country looks at when it comes to governing the economy because they are the one that strategizing policy, they put the mechanism together to make the economy to work. So my expectation for the president again is to ensure that he puts the right people there, the people that will do the job to the expectation of the country. So
Yeah.
that's how I see it.
okay. So let me weigh
Wonderful.
in on that topic.
Yeah.
There are a couple of things. Some of them can be immediate,
Yeah.
and some of them more medium to long term. So when we talk about the immediate things, they just passed a budget for the 3 million,
Yeah.
and when you take out salaries, the other money they're going to buy things. There's a policy on the books under both the PPCC law and under the Small Business Administration Act for the government to purchase from local businesses, especially Liberian business and even women businesses.
Mhm.
Enforce the law. Whenever there is a report from a from a ministry, look at the procurement, investigate whether the minimum of 25% were purchased from Liberian businesses, for example. It's on a book, it's a law, you got a budget, so there is nothing other than just enforce the law. On a medium-term basis, you have, like I mentioned, the private sector development initiative or the small business promotion. You have to resuscitate one of those two.
Yes.
And that way, you set up a seed fund. So you have a budget, or maybe you're coming to another 1-year budget, put a seed fund there, and get the central bank to mobilize the banking sector to maybe match that seed fund and make sure that you make available money for loans in critical sectors. That's another approach.
Yeah.
I think the third approach, which is much longer term, which the government has to confirm to face, is what do you do about the currency policy? I'm one person who really think that the dual currency policy limits the ability of government. The idea that you want
If
to
you were
operate
here, I will carry you on my back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
I agree with you.
You want to
Wholeheartedly.
operate with a currency that you have control over. I don't know why it's difficult for our people to understand this thing, whether it's psychological or whatever, I don't know. But the US currency is the US government that has control.
Thank you. Yep.
So
Yep.
remove the dual currency thing, deal with the Liberian dollars, and maintain that level of control.
Yeah.
Because policy wise, but you don't have that level of control over the US currency.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to control. So in the long-term business, if you really want to help Liberia, that's one of the most important things you can do. Because even the thing we talk about central bank intervening in the economy and all of that, a more central bank would be a central bank that is not working with a dual currency policy, but working with the Liberian currency as the sole legal tender. Then they will have the level of robustness that they need to intervene in the economy strategically. But for now, it's not there. So I think there is some short-term thing that I mentioned that they can do with the current budget, with the coming budget. Those are things that they can do. The real problem and the challenge in Liberia is the enforcement of the law. Okay, so if you don't enforce the law, for example, the PPCC law or the business administration law, if you don't enforce it to make sure that a minimum amount of procurement and purchases is done by local businesses, especially Liberian businesses, by women businesses, you are not going to get very far with respect to some of the major issues in the banking sector. And then, of course, if you can resuscitate some of the investment policies and make sure that there is some seed funding for Liberian businesses to be able to, help them in critical sectors, those are things that are short-term goals that can be achieved.
Yeah, in terms of, thank you. In support of what my colleagues just said, I'm looking at broad macroeconomic stability. That's an expectation on the part of President Boyka from the central bank. Do we have an economy with macroeconomic stability? And that's what the central bank has always delivered, and it should increase its delivery under this regime. And one area we could look at is the central bank increasing its monitoring as it regards to commercial banks. Are commercial banks doing what they're supposed to do according to the law? For example, you are only lending to this sector. What happens to the other sectors? Maybe the government will need an intervention to see that commercial banks are encouraged to do all of that. For example, those sectors that are being under considered. Another issue has to do with increasing outreach. I had an experience in Riverses. In Riverses, there was this reverend who had the church money and susu money. But he and his wife were taking turn to be home. Because according to him, in his own words, the money too much on us. And we are scared. So if I am away, my wife got to sit down and stay home and sit on the money.
Why not put it in the bank?
That's the point we are coming to. All our issues away our stay on the money. And the reason was just simple. There was no commercial bank station in Riverses, and the central bank didn't have an outpost there. But over time, the central bank corrected this issue. But correcting the issue was just not enough. If there is a central bank outpost in Riverses, for example, then what happens to individuals who intend to borrow? They have to come from maybe from Riverses to Grand Bassa or come to Monrovia. It becomes an additional cost. And the issue of access to capital, then it becomes limited. Access to capital should be unhindered, you know. So those people should remain in Riverses and have that level of access as they desire. And they should take all of their money to the commercial bank so that they all get protected.
Yeah.
And when the commercial bank has all of that, it is also lending to people who desire, and it becomes better for all of us. Another issue is, for example, the budget. If we look at our budget, every time we talk about recurrent is high. Yes, indeed, recurrent is high, but we also have the ability to ensure that a huge portion of our budget is considered for private sector investment, even at the local level for Liberians. If we are paying, for example, if for me, what percentage of our budget should be for local investment? Take this 25% gasoline tax we're talking about that is generating this huge amount for the National Road Fund. Is it a possibility that we say 5% for domestic investment for our local producers? That's a possibility.
It's a road fund. So it's going to be tended to road-related investment.
Road-related investment.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, can we do that also for maybe local investment for Liberian businesses?
You have the small business development initiative. You have the private sector development initiative. So you got the National Investment Commission. So what kind of policy are you going to put in place?
There is no need to recreate the policy once we have them.
Yeah.
Go to Ministry of Commerce. There is a unit that caters to small businesses. I was also there one time. And the last time I asked, they said, the director who used to be here is on vacation. And so what? If the director is on vacation, it means that we are not doing what we're supposed to do. Another area for me is mining. Gabriel, mining is another area where we have a huge potential. Overall, we have talked about value addition to output. Everything we produce in Liberia, and this has been a recommendation since the presidency or the regime of President Salif. Value addition at every stage of production. Yeah. Is it happening? It does not happen. So if it does not happen, it means whatever is exported is not so competitive on the global market. And we need to consider that seriously, because if that is happening, then we become competitive to some degree.
Yeah.
We become competitive. And one of the last things I can end with is, like the councillor said, increase use of the Liberian dollar. It is not a crime. It does not do anything wrong to us. In Ghana, in Sierra Leone, my family was in Sierra Leone the other time. To get a dollar, in fact, when I was in Sierra Leone, to go and get a US dollar, it's almost like taking blood test. So it means that they are preventing you because they have other needs for it, rather than you as an individual. So we need to look in this direction. If we're going to do it for people importing, then let's target import. And for example, Thomas Ray won't go buy his shoes, and his shoes are in US dollars. So he must go and access US dollars. Let us pay in Liberian dollars. Once we increase the usage of the Liberian dollar, it becomes better for our economy.
Yeah. No,
and just to chip in on that point,
go ahead.
The best you can do is to submit a revision to the central bank statute, because the central bank statute clearly mentioned dual currency. So if a government wants to really promote, empowerment of the CBL and empowerment of their ability, increase the ability to intervene in the economy, you have to go back and scrap that section
Yeah.
of the central bank as that allows you to operate from a dual currency policy perspective. So you can say that we will now run a single currency regime.
Yeah.
And then those who have a need for a foreign currency, the central bank will come up with operational, policies and procedure to make sure that you have access. But I mean, the way we do it in Liberia, I mean, it's just
How
incomprehensible.
without being going on a tangent here, what was the reason behind the use of dual currency? Was it like did they enact that because they wanted to stabilize the Liberian dollar? Was it why? Like what was the intention behind that? Because no other African country, maybe in the West here, does in West Africa does that.
I think if you go into history, there was a point in time when we were even using the British pound.
Jesus Christ.
And I feel that there's a history between the people who were running Liberia initially having some kind of background from the US.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There seemed to be some kind of preference for that
The US
strong link
dollar. Yeah, yeah.
with the US. But it doesn't make any economic sense
It's not. Yeah.
because that is a foreign currency and you have limited control over
Correct.
that
Yeah,
foreign currency.
yeah.
So if you want to control your economy, one of the cardinal things you can do is to scrap the dual currency policy and work with the Liberian dollar. But it's difficult for our people to understand because I mean there's this psychological connection to US
Yeah.
dollar, across the board. And that's why you see regime come, regime go, but the dual
Still
currency
maintain it.
policy
Maintain.
remain there, even
Yeah.
though it really doesn't make any economic sense. So in a long-term basis, if they really want to do something, that is something that they can address. But short-term, yeah, you have your budget. Let your budget speak to what is important for you. Based on what you put in the budget, to promote local enterprises and to ensure that they are funded and all of that. That would speaks a lot about how well you want to jumpstart the economy. You want to promote jobs because at the end of the day, it is the private sector that will drive the stability and the growth of the economy.
And the
And the
currency.
people
Yep.
in the government need to understand that.
Yep.
If they don't get it, they will not get it, and we'll just go from one cycle to the next, but the poverty in Liberia will continue to remain.
That is a brilliant point. I think we have
Yeah, you see,
one
Gabriel,
last question,
Gabriel,
and
just
then
a minute.
yeah, go ahead.
Gabriel, just a second. The first set of loans Liberia took from Great Britain and from America were all in US dollars.
Right.
So it may be something that has been following us for quite a long time. And at one point in time, we need to disengage. And I keep saying it. It is not wrong if we adopt a single currency country economy. It is in our best interest to do so. Ghana is ahead of all. They have a single currency.
The whole
So
of
if
Africa.
there is nothing wrong with it, but we must muster the courage through central government, and it takes one day for an introduction to the legislature. It takes our legislature one day or 1 week to have this discussion and reach a decision on it. But I don't know if the executive is prepared to make this to have this to initiate this discussion with the legislature and see how it goes before paperwork is done.
Let me pick us the legislation right now. How many of you guys right on here right now think the level of depth that you guys just explained is to anybody in the legislature can is able to put forward that policy and be able to articulate that to make the case as to why that is a single currency is important? Do you guys know anybody in a senate or rep who can actually put forth something that can and defend it and give a legitimate reason as to why that is important? Because I will hope that the way you guys are seeing it, there has to be that what is it, 73 representative or senators? There gotta be somebody who understands it to that level. So why is
Yeah,
it that we have not gotten to that level?
because our people like the US dollar.
Ay, ay, ay.
I'm being honest.
Ay, ay, ay.
I want to be bluffing with they like that.
Yeah.
They like it. It's not your
Yeah, I think
cryptocurrency.
there is a guy called Dapo. I
Double.
see him address a lot of financial issues,
Okay.
but it is something that has to be directed, I want to believe, from the top. And when I say from the top, maybe the
Yeah.
Minister of Finance or the
The pres no
presidency
from the
or
president.
whatever, because it's deeply ingrained in the Liberian society that we are special and that we can be like other African countries. But the truth is,
But
most
we're
of the other
behind.
African countries are growing faster than us economically. They are more stable, they are more prosperous, and they are doing everything better than us in terms with their local currency.
Exactly.
So, what is the harm? And when we say you can't control the US dollar, it's serious. I mean, you just can't control it. For example, you don't control how people bring it in, you don't really control how people take it out. You don't control who all comes here to source it. For example, if
It
I'm
can
in Guinea,
weaponize it. It can be
yeah,
weaponized. Right.
if I'm in Guinea and I'm having problem with the central bank and facilitating my transaction, I can cross over in Liberia and just go right in the market, sit down there
US.
and source it. So the continuous excessive demand for US dollar in Liberia is, and undermining the Liberian dollar is
Yeah.
artificial in my view,
Yeah.
because we have no way to know whether people are coming from Sierra Leone, from Guinea,
Yeah.
from Ivory Coast to collect it. We don't even know whether other people are coming specifically to Liberia to get it, because they can't get it in other places. But the moment you take it out, then obviously nobody can, because now everybody have to send a demand to the central bank. They have to make a rating request of why they need it. The central bank has to approve it and all of that. But it's difficult. But I think there are few people there. But I think the problem in Liberia is politics seems
Oh well.
to
Yeah.
dominate everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't see anything in economic terms. We don't see anything in legal terms. We don't see anything in technical terms. Everything is
It's about
political.
politics. Yeah.
And that is undermining the growth and development of the country, because everything is not political.
It shouldn't be.
Like now we're discussing job situation, we're discussing intervention in the economy.
Right.
It's not typically political. Anybody can come in and make a contribution. So
Right.
I think they can do it. It might be a little long term, because you have to pass a law and says, okay, we're no longer dealing with dual currency, we're now dealing with a single currency, and this is the way we will go about it, stuff like that. But it can be done if people have the interest of the country at heart, and if they recognize
Yeah.
that it is undermining the growth and development. And I don't think the 50 countries in Africa that do not have a dual currency policy, I don't think they are wrong.
They're not wrong. No, I don't. No. So, um, if any of you guys know the age to any of those senators or representatives, please bring them on the show so we can tell them what they need to do to go inform their senators or representatives to push for a single currency. I
Gabriel,
Yeah,
really mean that. Um,
yeah,
Gabriel,
maybe we
yeah,
can check on the person who is
Gabriel.
responsible for banking and currency. I think they might have a committee like that, and bring
yeah,
the person on the
Yes,
show and kind of grill
Gabriel.
them.
What this discussion brings to me is the Committee on Currency and Banking.
Mhm.
ah,
Mhm.
okay,
We invite maybe somebody from the central bank or from the legislature on currency and banking to see how they are thinking. But one thing I can say is that, in recent time, President Bouazizi was the first president of Liberia, I stand to be corrected, who took the oath of office in a domestically produced gown.
mm,
And I still stand to be corrected. And in my view, he was sending a message to all of us: think internally.
mhm,
That's how I'm beginning to think. President Bouazizi was telling us to think internally. And if we are supposed to think internally, it means that what is Liberia or what is Liberian should be given priority as compared to something outside. And that's how we should be thinking. If we say a single currency, but with our I don't see anybody in the legislature right now who has the courage, the guts, even Darius DeLong, to say let's try and proffer this bill to see if we can introduce a single currency regime in Liberia. I want to see the person. But we have very good people in Liberia who can do the research and advise our legislature on the ups and downs of this incident,
mhm.
of this development. That if we adopt a single currency, this is where we will be. And if we adopt a dual currency, or if we continue with dual currency, these are the drawbacks. I was talking to a friend, and he said all the things that are happening in Liberia, the drugs, pay everybody coming to Liberia. It is because Liberia is a hub for US dollar. Take on the US dollar, you will not see all these things.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. I think that individual is
That's it.
right. Yeah.
Let me
And
piggyback
I
on
did wonder when you
that
mentioned
issue
something
about
like
the
that.
country gown and stuff like that.
Right.
It's good on the optics, it's good on the symbolism, and permit me for a little bias in leaning towards the law. But Bwaka would do better if he comes up with an executive order directing his government that look, this budget that we pass, I expect you to spend or to buy Liberian in this, but he can reiterate his policy on what he wants. Because even the agricultural sector you're talking about, if the Ministry of Education, I assume they feed the children in school, right? If they buy Liberian rice, for example, to distribute across the school and insist on buying only Liberian rice, that would be firstly a jumpstart in the agricultural sector. Now, when farmers get the money, they have the ability to pay their loan, they might improve. So when you want to make a policy in government, it is not just to do it yourself, like go take a drug test or wear a country gown. It is by law that you institutionalize. So either you do an executive order, which is much faster because once you sign it, you release it, it becomes law. Only is limited for 1 year. Or you go to the legislature and pass a law to enforce maybe the appearance in some programs or whatever. But we should try to institutionalize some of the things that we are doing so that even when you leave power, the people coming after you are obliged. Like now we are telling Bwaka, you can't divert from the tenure, even though Ellie is no more. But because she did it by way of law, we tell Bwaka, no, you can't divert. It's a law, it's an institution. So if you're going to promote something, you got an executive order and you have statute, you go that way, and then it becomes a issue that will continue after you. But not just maybe you wear the gown on and everybody see you, like the way we are wearing the propose suit, right? And everybody will, now we are is going there, no propose suit. But if we had a law that said all government officials will appear in propose suit, maybe they will still be wearing propose suit, So I'm just, make that note.
Gentlemen, I think we usually run the show for an hour and a half, but I think this was a great topic, so I think we allow for extra 30 minutes. But I have one last question for you guys, and I this was something I couldn't pass up, right? So as we're aware, the revenue I think is 16% less. It was 745 last year. I think this year is coming in at 625, which is about 15 or 16%, right? And we know there's the government of Liberia has a loan, uh, the CBL loan the government of Liberia 83 million. What do you guys think the probability of collection is going to be on that? Because technically, I don't think the government is CBL supposed to be loaning this government money. Um, but unfortunately, that's what happened. But with the decline in revenue, where I think there might be the government maybe cutting some places to make sure it stay within its budget. Do you guys think the CBL, the loan to CBL, will be impacted?
Yeah, for sure. Let me come in. It goes back to uh bad debt or bad loan or non-performing loan again. You know, the government is the government, So what are you going to do? But in this case, I believe, from my own view, is that the CBL needs to start working with the government effectively. The CBL does not need to wait until it's time to start collecting the loan. And the government also, in their own self, needs to start limiting their spending based on priority. Because remember, you have a debt to pay. So start spending based on priority. Limit your spending. Spend when it's needed because you have to pay by your debt. It's almost like on an individual basis. You owing this payday loan, you need to pay them. When your paycheck comes, you should take that into priority. Even if you cannot pay all the debt, pay a portion of your debt, and then you spend on priority things. So the government needs to take that into consideration, and CBS needs to start working with the government, sending in communication, be actively involved with the government, letting them know, hey, I know you have a decline in revenue, but this is the debt you owe us. We will appreciate it were you to where we also we can consolidate your debt. Because the only way to get part of this debt is to do what we call loan consolidate the debt. And you may not get all the 83 million, but you can get part of it. Like you can divide it on a quarterly basis, the 83 million on a quarterly basis, and collect it from the government. But for that to take effect, CBI will need to send a communication, a direct communication, a subjective communication. You're not going to be begging the government. They owe you. So send a subjective communication and let them know, well, we will consolidate the loan based on your revenue. Since it's below, it drops 16%. This is what we can do for you. Restructure the loan for the government. We will do this, and you will pay in full installment. That is on a quarterly basis. I mean, that's how I see it, because the government owes the CBI, so the CBI is not going to be begging the government to pay. So the CBI need to be very subjective, coming strong, and let them know this is what we will do. We will consolidate the loan for you. We'll restructure it because we know your revenue has dropped 16%.
Yeah, so let me just weigh in and thank the fellow for his comment. I think I would have loved to know a little bit more about what's driving the decline, because that way you can, calibrate your response specifically to the decline.
Yes,
But we
you're
take
right.
it that the general mandate of the government is to expand the economy, expand economic growth. So the government, firstly, don't have a very good record of paying loans, whether it's domestic debt or it's foreign debt. They don't have a very good record. So I am doubtful, but I guess on a practical level, they might have to find a way around it. But what I want to say is that there are just two cardinal things that this government have to do. And I want to re-emphasize, because if it filters down into the economy, and they have to make a serious pitch to promote investment, both domestic investment and to attract international investment, because that way you get employment, you get spending, the private sector spending, helping out, and with investment you get additional employment opportunities. So that way you have a what we call endogenous growth, as opposed to having a flat government budget where it's always 600-700 million. You got to think about how you're going to expand it, and you can't expand it. You have to have a strategy that you are working with. So we would like to see this new government come up with a clear-cut strategy as to what they are going to do to expand, the economy and stuff like that. And it can be started with what's driving the decline. Because if we know what's driving the decline, then we are able to tailor our response, to those sectors, in addition to engineering other aspects. But yeah, I guess we kind of closing in on the conversation, and I don't know, it's time to wrap up now, or you announce another wrap up.
Yeah, that was the last question. From there, I want us to go to maybe
Yeah,
Let me pause there.
can I make a comment on it, please, Gabriel?
Yeah. Go ahead. I was coming to you.
Yeah. Okay. Now, with regards to the 83 million, first of all, if you check, there's an ECOWAS framework that says central bank lending to the government has a threshold. And I can confirm right now whether that 83 million, it exceeded the threshold of central bank lending to the government, or it is below it. But I will assume that it is above the threshold, because it has been a perennial problem with us that the central bank lends to the government and it is beyond the threshold. And when it comes to servicing that payment or that loan, it becomes a challenge for the central bank. And the point where we can say, can the central bank litigate against the government? The answer absolutely is no. So obviously, like Flomo said, it will have to fall back to restructuring and see how it happens. But on the broader side, I think that there are areas where if we have revenue decline by 16%, it is also a function of the waivers, the multiple waivers in government at the level of the legislature, the level of the Senate, the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, and other businesses.
You haven't studied that, how you got to know? You're making an assumption. You can't just make an assumption that because we have not yet gone into it year on year, line by line, to know where this decline is coming from. So in the absence of that, you cannot make an assumption.
So, Councillor, you may be right, but broader thinking, every economy has leakages.
Right.
Every economy has leakages. So we are thinking in terms of the leakages and possible areas. That's what I'm considering. But if we assume that there are no leakages, then what it means is that we must be innovative to see how we increase government revenue. Like I was listening the other day, the LRA has the potential to increase government revenue. Like somebody said, to $1 billion. If that is a possibility, then we know there's somewhere innovative they are thinking, and they should roll it out so that the public gets to know it, and it becomes something that everybody learns, everybody gives its support. Let's take, for example, another area I was looking at is import or export levies. Do we increase import or export levies, or do we drop them? Empirically, I can sit here and say if we drop import or export levies, government revenue will expand. Or if we increase those levies, government revenue will increase. But it requires some study, because there's a possibility that if you drop, for example, like we say in basic economics, if the price drops, the amount will increase.
Yeah.
So maybe if we reduce our various levies, for example, import and export levies, then there will be an increase in the utilization of those channels, for example, import, and it may jumpstart or increase government revenue. That's another way of thinking. But absolutely, to say it without any bias, I personally have confidence in the capacity of the current Minister of Finance, because I know him, I work with him. I think he can deliver on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Perfect. I think that let's
great.
take maybe a few comments here, and then I'll have you guys your final thoughts, and then we'll wrap up from here. I think I kept you guys for too long. All right. Let me go to the end here. This is Dave Jha. He said politics dominates our society because majority of those in control are non-professional. They are generally talking heads, so they approach leadership without professional mindset. All right. I think this one is from Dave Jai again. He said the Liberian educational system, especially at the tertiary level, are in part responsible for the poor economic performances in Liberia. Liberia is poor relationship. There is poor relationship between what is practiced and what is taught or research within our college or university system. Any thoughts on this?
No. What I think is, when it comes to the economy, there is nothing like endogenous growth.
Mm-hmm.
Always looking outside. Every time you elect a Liberian president, they fly to Washington, they fly to Brussels. Mm-hmm. They say they're looking for foreign assistance. Come on. What will make Liberia grow has to start in Monrovia, Liberia, and across the 43,000 square miles. You're not going to get growth from Washington. Washington will help you if you're already growing.
Yeah, exactly.
Brussels will help you if you're already growing, but you have to start. So the things that will make growth locally is what we should focus on.
Mhm.
Are we buying Liberia? When the government purchases, every time they purchase, do they make a conscious effort to buy Liberian?
Mhm.
No. Do we have a standard investment channel that is looking at strategic sectors and saying, okay, this sector is not working, so we will make this money available. We'll work with the central bank will work with the financial sector and make a certain amount available and wipe out the corruption from the system so that the people who need those money to invest can invest.
Yeah.
That is the way you will improve employment. That is the way you will improve local spending, and it will have a multiplier effect on the economy. But the idea that, oh, let's go abroad, let's talk to VIPs and they will throw money on us. Even sometimes when that happens, they throw the money on or corruption eases up. Anyway, that's the 26th or 27th time now, right? Or maybe we to 30.
I don't think he's keeping track. I
You're
think he left. I
right.
don't think he kept track of that. So Larry is actually one of our panelists here regularly.
Yeah.
He's one of the yeah, panelists. He said he's traveling. He's on the road, but he said this is a good show. So I guess you guys really I enjoy the show as well. Again, this is man. Dave is busy. I guess he really liked this topic. Um, so it is possible to ensure proper lending by financial institutions when the country is unable to trace borrowers and have full accountability of the population. Hmm.
That is true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's like
That is
revolving
true.
from basket.
yeah,
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. So if you
You know,
borrow,
you,
go
you
ahead.
know, back then, they had some some kind of company in Liberia that was doing macro loan to our mothers and sister, and there was some kind of Bangladeshi company of
Yeah,
the
Brock.
Brock. The
Yeah.
market women they just to go stay on the line. They get them some kind of card. They show. They say, "Oh, I get business." They just getting the loan.
wow,
Some of these mothers were sincere to be coming back to be paying the loan. But how can you uh, conduct borrowing of money to people who call themselves businesses when you don't have proper identification for those people in order to trace them? That's where I get back to say we need to fix our social security system in a very unique way,
mhm,
where every citizen and residents of Liberia we have a unique identification number that will be tied to them, that will be interconnected in various government and other public agency system, in private system. Because that way, when somebody borrow the money, if you can get them, their social security number tied to them. Yeah,
yeah,
it's tied to them. You'll be able to trace them.
yeah,
Even in America, if you change your name, that new name tied to your social, a daddy will find you.
yeah,
No matter what, no matter where you go, you will be traced. You borrow the people money, you won't pay. Trust me, they will garnish your check because your social security tied to your name. But unlike the United States or other developing countries, Liberia, we might see it to be difficult. It's not difficult. That government comes, government go. I don't see them really emphasizing on social security. It is
yeah,
very, very important. It helps every sector of society. It helps the public sector, the private sector. It helps everywhere in government when we are able to have a true identification for every citizens and resident in Liberia. It's
yeah,
very important. I like that question or that comment or that person posted. It's good because you will
uh,
not be able to account for people when you cannot identify the people. You
yeah,
cannot be able to have a proper accounting system when you cannot identify people.
yeah. Uh,
You
so
know,
any
yeah.
feedback?
I,
Yeah,
I was making my initial contribution. I said borrowing is like a revolving fund, situation. And if you borrow and you don't pay, you deprive others of the ability of the or access to funding. And all of us who borrow should be able to pay. I like where Flomo is coming from. And I will give you this situation of what we call SEPE in Liberia, sell and pay. You know the SEPE situation, those women who go to the cold storage and borrow the chicken, the fish, and all of that, they are borrowing from other people. But if they lend it to you and you refuse to pay, because I personally know a situation where the SEPE lady was coming and the other lady said, when I want your tell say, and I hear. You know what you have done? You know what you have done?
Yeah.
Come on now. I hang it right there. We should be able to pay, borrow and pay.
Okay. So one last comment, and then this is the last one. This is Douglas. He said the Constitution. Is it true? He said the Constitution forbids all tenure official not to go to
not
political
to
or not
go,
to get
you know,
engaged in
you,
politics. I think this is what.
Most
let me
regular
let me
people,
say let me
when they
say
say
this.
constitution, they really mean law. That's
Yeah,
the normal
they're
regular
talking
people.
about the
That's what
law,
they mean.
but
Yeah.
but honestly, when you look at it, go back to the Constitution. It says all Liberian citizens are free to participate or to join any political institution. So if any other law that will come again and say, oh, you because you are a attending person, you're not allowed to be in political or to go political, the Constitution say any law that is found unconstitutional with a shall be declared unconstitutional. So
So
if any
so
other
what you're saying is if that is in the Constitution, that if that is
uh,
in the
uh,
Constitution, then that infringes upon the right of
the right of those
the
individuals
individual.
who are attending official is
Let
not
me,
in the
let me,
Constitution.
let me correct
It's in,
something on that. Let me correct.
it's not in the Constitution.
Let me correct
It's that the
something on that.
statutes that were created, those who created a statute did not create a statute in consultation with the Constitution, because this is completely unconstitutional. Because the
No,
Constitution,
So
let
the
me
question
correct something
becomes:
on
is
that.
this
I think
accurate
people,
or
people need to be very slow. People need to be very
I can't tell
slow.
right now if it's accurate,
Let
but
me correct
I'm
something.
just deliberating based on what he said. He said the Constitution forbid. No, the same Constitution says all citizens are free to participate in any or to join any political party or institution. So how then can it forbid these people whom you refer to as tenant? Because guess what? The president is on a tenant position.
Let me correct something.
let me
The
hear from
vice
Wonder.
president is on tenant.
Yeah,
Yeah, let me hear from Wonder.
yeah. The Constitution grants the legislature the power to pass law.
Mhm.
So when the legislature passes a law, they are acting in line with the Constitution. So the issue of the code of conduct is a law passed by the legislature, and the legislature ability to pass law comes from the Constitution.
Mhm.
So the only time you can speak of unconstitutionality is when it goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court interprets the law.
Mhm.
But it's a presumption that every time the legislature acts, they act in line with the Constitution. It's a presumption. In law, there are presumption. For example, if we haven't heard from you in 7 years, we can presume that you are dead.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of presumption that occurs in law. So when the legislature passes a law, it is presumed that if they acted in line with the
With the
Constitution,
Constitution, right?
unless that law goes to the Supreme Court,
And
and the Supreme Court said, no,
no.
this particular line, this particular paragraph is unconstitutional. But people should refrain from just like sitting in the chair and saying this law is unconstitutional and that law is unconstitutional, because there is a presumption that when the legislature acts, they always act constitutionally.
Mhm.
Okay?
That's why we
But
got you on
it's
here
not
now
always
to be able
correct.
to bring those
No,
clarity to
It's
the
not
people
it's not
that
always
don't
correct,
understand the
you
law.
know.
That's why it's called a presumption.
Yeah.
So
So
to correct it, you have to go to the Supreme Court because
for
they have the
review.
constitutional authority to interpret. Like, for example, let me give you one last case.
Yeah.
When we had this case with the 10-year clause in Liberia,
Mm.
sometimes they can pass a law and it's a little vague. And when the law is vague, then everybody operating the way they see the law.
Mhm.
So that controversy will end up to the court. And then the court will say, this is what the law says. But until that law goes to the the Supreme Court
For review, yeah.
for review and to be declared constitutional or unconstitutional. Every law passed by the legislature is presumed to be constitutional. So let's not be quick to call a law unconstitutional when the Supreme Court has not yet spoken.
No, I was just speaking based on what our forefather wrote in the 1985 Constitution that says.
You didn't cite a clause. You didn't cite a clause. You need to be specific.
Yeah.
For
it's
me,
in the Constitution.
I see
the article is subsection, cite it, then we can all read it and know what it says. But I mean, it's being vague to just say the Constitution says. You be specific.
Right. Okay. Go ahead, then we will wrap up.
Yes, for me, it's like going back to where we started this discussion on the issue of tenuity. Tenuity is constitutional because it comes from the legislature. And because it comes from the legislature, if we say it should not happen, then we have to go back here for it to be redone so that they introduce something else. But at the moment, as we are faced with it, all those with tenure positions should be protected because that tenuity comes from the law until we go somewhere to the court and the court says no. But in the meantime, we should have them.
Yeah. All right. I think this was this was a great discussion. I enjoyed. I'm glad you guys came on. As I said earlier from the beginning of the show, I hope I'll be reaching out to you guys again on Saturday at same time, 3 o'clock. So hopefully you can join us.
Well, when the topic comes like a day earlier, right?
Yeah. So what we'll do, we plan usually in a week in advance. So we'll send you guys a topic where you like it. You can join. And I know Mr. Willis keeping count on your number of bucks.
He has not done it again. He has not done
it. So maybe coming back next week, you can hone your limitation on utilizing the word.
No, taking kilo.
No, I'm going to do that a lot more because firstly, it's my background. I work with the Anti-Corruption Commission. I work with the FIU. So it's my background. And two, I really think that is the fundamental problem in Liberia. We may have other problems, but it could be like 80 to 90% of Liberia problem is corruption.
So I want to hear you guys' final thoughts. I will go with Mr. Flomo.
Yeah.
Final thoughts or comments before we wrap up.
Oh, well, let me say thanks to
all of any angle.
Let me say thanks to all of you, all of my brothers and professionals on the show, and to our listening audience, for giving all your time, listening to us, and to you guys for taking all your time, for all interacting, exchanging ideas and thoughts. It was wonderful again being here. Paul, this is to the new government. To govern is not an easy thing. Everybody knows that. But when you are in the position to govern, let your governing activity be based on priority. Personally, I believe touching the areas of turning position right now, that's not the basic focus of the Liberian people. President Bouaka and his team need to focus on the basic social services that are hampering the people on a daily basis. That should be the focus, from the beginning. Then people fighting for jobs, people fighting for interest. Focus on the restructuring the lives of the Liberian people, creating livable wage for the people. It's time because the people elected you because they believe in you. They have faith in you. That's why they booted out the ex-president, is because they felt that you're going to come in with policy that will create livable wage, livable income that will improve their lives. But when you come now and start fighting other people for turning position, is that improving the lives of the people? Is that creating livable wage for the people? Absolutely no. Those things can be on the side and take care of the Liberian people business. Take care of the Liberian people business. Improve the lives of the people. Improve the economy. Start gearing towards the private sector. It's time for you to work with the private sector and say, hey, how can we create employment? It's about time because the people elect me 6 years quit to go. So when you start taking 1 or 2 years to be fighting for any position and how you can be able to satisfy your political will, those people who might have funded your campaign or work with you, you're gonna be taking 2, 3 years done. And there'll be another outcry again. And the people who like this say, well, we're going to take Comey or somebody else again. You don't want that. So it's time for him to begin from day one, working for the interest of the people, putting the people interest first and forget about the political people interest. Because right now what I see is satisfying the will of the political people that are behind him.
Yeah. Okay.
He's not fighting for the people. So that's just my advice. As want to bring up for them to listen. If they take it well, they don't take it as say.
All
But
right.
the interest of the people matter. You see here, when a president is elected, from day one, he start fighting for the American people. So that's how I think it should be.
Thank you. Mr. Wonder,
Yeah. Okay, so
your
I just
final thoughts.
yeah. So the first thing I think I did justice with respect to the issue of tenure.
Yeah.
I was very clear that unless it goes before the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court decide that a specific line or a specific clause in the Constitution, I mean not Constitution, but in the Act is unconstitutional, the president and his team has a binding duty as Liberian citizens and as public official to adhere to every law
Yeah.
on the book, whether
Yeah.
it's a statute, regulation, policy, protocol, everything. They need to abide by it. If they don't like it, they go for interpretation to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will decide which one is unconstitutional, and now going forward, they want you to follow that. So it's a non-issue. They shouldn't continue along that path. With respect to the central bank and the performance and how to engender growth, I feel like we have a law at the Commerce Ministry, the Small Business Act. We have a law at the PPCC that calls for purchasing from local enterprises, and at a minimum, I think I know it's 25% in other instances, and in some instances, women-owned businesses. I think the best thing that they can ever do to promote the economy is to enforce that law to the letter.
Yeah.
Every time they are buying, they must think whether there is a Liberian doing the service, a Liberian doing this business, stuff like that, and make it a standing. It's like, yeah, what kind of cars do the American government officials ride? They don't ride
American
a
car.
BMW
Yeah.
No.
or no, they don't ride cars made in Europe.
Got a lie.
They ride Ford, they ride Chevrolet. So it's the same thing. Every time you want to buy a Dex, it said made in Liberia. No, take it back. Bring me the one that made in Liberia. Every time the Ministry of Education is going to buy maybe food or for the children or whatever, is this rice or Liberian rice? No, take it back. Bring me the Liberian one. Stuff like that. Once we infiltrate that, you will start seeing endogenous growth
Yeah.
from the local communities. I think they can do that. I think they have to go back and resuscitate some of the domestic investment initiative, like the private sector development loans or the small business pro loan, whatever it is. I think if the government is serious, they have a budget. Let's see what the seed investment they put into that fund to see that, okay, we are serious about promoting local businesses. So we are putting in this amount. We will work with the central bank to expand it through working with the financial sector. I think that is that. And I think maybe for all to really do justice, we will need a all day exclusive on the issue of the dual currency policy and the single currency thing.
That
I
would
think
be. I
bring
think that would be the next to stay in line with the central bank topic. Maybe we should do that next Saturday. So
yeah, so we
I
get
will.
one of the politicians from the legislature, whatever,
Yeah.
if that's possible, so
Yeah.
that we can really ask them what is wrong, why can't we do this thing,
Yeah.
So that I would like to stop on the note. I myself, I enjoy the show. I never get stuck. I guess animated talking about the Liberia economy and
Yeah.
law and stuff like that. So I'm available whenever we can.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. And the man I've been keeping track on you. Let's hear from him.
Yeah, Gabriel. First of all, I want to say thanks to Focus on Liberia for the invite. It was worth it. To my fellow panelists, it was a mighty experience. It's my first interaction with almost with everybody here, but
Yeah.
the output, the lessons learned, and all of that, it was very, very rewarding. Our worldwide listeners, thank you for coming. You brought everything, and it is because of you that we were challenged with this to do our best. Now, let me close by saying that, Liberia politically, has done well than economically. Liberia
Mm,
politically has done well than economically. We have had over 50 elections in this in Liberia. And each time we are having election, see the number of people we pull on election day. If we take similar action economically to pull that number of people in political and in economic activities, you know what we're going to be? Just take an imagination. Oh, every time we have election, it is over 1 million persons. Every time we have election, at least 1.5, 1.5. Can we pull 1.5 million persons into economic activities and see what would become the next day?
mm,
If we do this, we would we're going to exceed every projection or everything that is holding us back. And that's one area where we should think strongly. The economy is not doing well, and we should all make our contributions. I heard this issue of ongoing discussion for the agriculture bank, the resuscitation of the agriculture bank.
yeah.
If we are having a situation where loans are skewed towards you know, trade and construction, then it behoves the government. It becomes a responsibility of the government to ensure that we have something for agriculture. And the government should take the responsibility, for example, ensuring that we have the agriculture bank back.
Mhm.
Afriland Bank is doing it in Monrovia. Yes, it's doing it in Liberia. Yes, but it is not enough for our own demand for agriculture and agricultural produce and services. So we need to look in that direction. From the beginning, we talk of access, and we're talking about Ghana.
Mhm.
Everybody is moving from Accra to far off Ghana, Aflao, Cape Coast, just a
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It should be a challenge to all of us in government and out of government that we can do some minimum investment in the area of roads so that all of us go. And the farmers are saying that we can produce, but each time we produce, the thing can get ratting on us because no road.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a challenge. We as a country, we are able. Long time ago, before I studied economics, I went to the Ministry of
Are
Planning
you
and Economic
wrapping up
Affairs.
or what? Are you
I'm
wrapping up or
wrapping
you
up.
restarting the
I
conversation?
went to the Ministry of Planning
No,
and
you
Economic
gotta wrap
Affairs.
up, man.
Let me wrap it up. And I met this
Yeah,
economist who said,
yeah. Don't
in
start
this
a new
country,
story.
we can do everything in this country. So we
Yeah,
can do everything in this country, and I just give it to everybody. We are able to do everything in this country, and I will continue to say thanks to everybody, man. It was a wonderful. I'm coming back, though.
No, we'll,
yeah.
we'll we'll bring you guys back next week. Next week on the I want us to look at. I think I agree with what Wanda said. The case for single currency and what are the
Yeah,
case for dual or single currency to for us to really explore that. So
yeah.
hopefully we'll get somebody from the government to be with us here. But again, this was a great discussion. A lot of people was watching. People enjoyed it. I enjoyed the comment. I enjoyed your perspective on this. And as I said, every time I sit with people. I don't care who you are. My utmost responsibility is to learn something from each and every one of you. And I learned a lot from you today. We have a saying here that regardless of whether you agree with what we say here today or you think we were just running our mouths because we didn't have anything to do on Saturday, one thing that is always and that will always remain the truth is that we're all Liberians. So whether you agree with us or you don't agree with us, we're all Liberians. So we're going to leave you with that song that says we're all Liberian. Without further ado, have yourself a good weekend, and we'll see you next Saturday.
All right.
We are Labira. Labira is our home. Labira people. Is everyone. Labira. Liberia.